Hey, good afternoon. Can everybody hear me okay? Clearly? Okay, good, perfect. Sorry for being 1 minute late. I had an issue with my mic for some reason. Anyway, call this committee of the whole meeting to order, and I'll go through the roll call, make sure all our technology is working. Councillor Foster.
Present. Sound check. Testing.
Oh, that's really loud for me. Okay. Councillor Van Leeuwen.
I'm here.
I'm gonna have to turn my sound down here because you guys are so loud. Councillor McElwain.
I'm here.
Councillor Kittredge is, I know he won't be able to join us today. He just let us know today that he can't join us, so I know he's not here. Councillor Dunsmore.
I am here.
Councillor McCrae.
Here.
Okay, we are all here. So we'll go on to the first item, and that is confirmation of disclosure of pecuniary interest. Anybody have a disclosure today with any of the items on our agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to a recommendation for our agenda that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington confirm the agenda for its meeting held May 17th, 2021. Can I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Dunsmore, second by Councillor Van Leeuwen. All in favor? And that's carried. Moving on to confirmation of minutes. We have two sets of minutes there. I have a recommendation of the minutes of our committee of the whole meeting held March 22nd and April 19th, 2021 be adopted as circulated. Can I have a mover for that, please? Councillor McCrae, second by Councillor Dunsmore. Any questions with the minutes? All in favor? And those minutes are carried. Moving on to presentations. The first item that we have on our agenda is the Termite Survey report for Fergus and Elora. And we have a presentation by Dr. Timothy Myles. I will hand it over to Brett initially, and then he can pass it over to Dr. Myles. Over to you, Randy.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of Council. I am pleased to be bringing this report on the results of the termite survey that was completed last fall by Dr. Timothy Myles and his team. They primarily surveyed the areas that were known in Fergus and Elora to contain termites. The report kind of brings us up to date as to where we know we're at with respect to the termites. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dr. Myles to present his report to you. Thank you.
Well, welcome, Dr. Myles.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, all good.
Am I on?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. So I saw that there was a PDF, and am I going to have any video, or how am I going to present the figures? There we go. Okay. Okay. So I'm not sure how to advance this. Do I say next or what?
Yeah, if you can say next, that'd be great, and then we'll make sure.
Okay, I don't know if any of you have read this. Here's the report cover. This was issued last December. The survey was actually conducted from August through October on weekends, and I went myself with four technicians or two technicians. We had hatchets, we rang doorbells, we went into yards, we checked wood in the ground, we checked stumps, firewood, things of that nature. Oftentimes just a wood chip mulch in the ground is adequate. Can you all hear me? Okay. And so we probably spent approximately 5 minutes per yard. And we used the city's pre-existing termite maps, which had been developed by drawing a 400-foot perimeter around previously known activity. Let's see if we can advance to that map. I don't know if you've seen these earlier maps. There we go. That's Elora. And let's just click through the next couple. And that's Fergus. Oh, okay, so these were within those boundaries, the dashed purple line, we inspected every property, or almost every property. There were some people who elected not to participate and didn't invite us onto their property, but almost every property within those areas. And these are the results that we found. Next slide. Okay, for Elora, this is south of the river and then north of the river, downtown. Can you see my mouse pointer? Probably not. Okay. So if it's dark red, we found activity on the property. And if it's light pink or the light red color, that indicates areas that we didn't actually find activity on the property, but because those are on the same block or in between other properties that did have activity, then we inferred that termites would probably be on those properties, although the landscaping was very clean or there were no stumps and there was just no way to detect them in a yard survey. And then the blue areas are just designated after the fact as those are the areas that surround these contiguous red areas. Okay, let's show the map for Fergus. Well, this is sort of that in between Fergus and Elora. There were those two areas, and then one more large area for Fergus. Okay. Now, I guess we've had some feedback just in the last few days as some residents have had the opportunity to view these maps, and they're saying, hey, wait a minute, I've got termites. My whole block's got termites and it's not showing up on the map. So evidently, I haven't had time to investigate those issues. I don't know if they were just completely outside the area, or if we somehow missed the activity that was there. But evidently, our maps are not 100% accurate, and we never claimed that they would be. But I think we do see a very clear pattern of where there are some areas that are real hot spots. And okay, now getting to the totals, I was a little bit I was a little bit surprised to see really how extensive this is when we add up all the properties. I've been starting another project in Elmira, as some of you have probably read. And in Elmira, we have about 139 red and blue properties, and of those, maybe 120 signed up to participate. But in Fergus, in Center Wellington, we have 480 or 478, almost 500 properties. So if I apply the same costing figures, we come up to almost what would be $1 million for a 5-year project, $200,000 a year. I know you've put up 60,000, and so it's quite a bit short of what I would need to run the full program. And so I'm in a bit of a quandary. It's really more work than I want to take on at this period of my life and career. I'm semi-retired from the city of Guelph, but still working mornings in Guelph. And so I have afternoons for another project, which is now taken up with Elora. I could maybe try and squeeze this in, but I just think it's really too much for me to squeeze in without really gearing up to almost an entire second career and hiring teams of people to be working in different areas. So I'm really not sure how to go ahead. Even if you had the money on the table, it's the scale of it is, about 5 times what I had hoped it would have been. If it had been a nice little tight project, we could have easily done it. And I feel an obligation to try and help and to extend what we've learned and how to manage termites in this way. But that's where we stand. I'll just take whatever questions you might have.
Great, thanks very much, Dr. Myles. Before I turn it over for questions, when you talk about a $1 million program, what is that to? What would be the goal at a very high level? What would that be to accomplish?
Well, where we've done this, we've consistently reached what appears to be eradication. And so we reach a level of several years of inactivity, which in Guelph, we've had the luxury of the way things have unfolded, of checking these properties for many years. We've had the criterion of 3 years of inactivity before it goes from red to blue, and then 2 additional years before it goes from blue to white. So we've cleared almost 30 blocks in that manner. So I'm pretty sure we can get to, within 5 years, we can get to very, very strong suppression that usually looks like apparent eradication. Now, I never want to guarantee eradication, but we can get an extremely suppressed condition from the initial condition.
Okay, thanks. That helps. Members of council, Councillor McCray.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. This sort of just blew the wind out of my sails, hearing that Dr. Myles is thinking our project is a lot more than he was planning to take on. I guess question for Dr. Myles, assuming we are still keen to proceed, even if it was to cost us $1 million, would you have any plans to maybe train others in your technique that we could have people continue to deal with our termite situation? Because I've heard from numerous members of the community who quite frankly are very concerned about termites, maybe not on their properties or maybe on their properties, and what the termite tax is costing them in terms of, for some people, $6,000 for termite treatment on their sites. So I'm open to what things you might. Sorry?
I'm sorry. I have a system that is pretty much listed by a number of techniques. The borates, either as rods, sprays, garage sprays, and so forth, doing indoor inspections, and then heavy use of borates. Those things are available and listed. Nematodes, spring and fall, Steinernema carpocapsae. It's a commonly available nematode. Yardwood cleanup, especially focusing on stumps. Absolutely most important resource to eliminate is stumps. And then chemical treatments where required. So that's usually sort of a gray area, but because the homeowners want to, provide safety for their homes, they usually voluntarily do that. So I'm not hiding the methods. Those are essentially publicly available. I'm not going to hold somebody's hand and teach them how to do it exactly. And there are some people who are out there who I guess are available to try and implement the project according to those guidelines. So does that answer your question adequately?
No. Yes and no. I guess the challenge for me is while the homeowners are focusing on eradicating termites on their properties, there still remains the challenge of public property where the termites are still living that we need to deal with. So I'm still looking for a solution to deal with that.
Well, by public property, what do you mean? Because I don't see a lot of parks or public property encompassed by these areas.
Well, okay, I'll just pick a street, South River Road. I mean, there may be termites on the road right of way as opposed to on the actual resident's property. So how do we deal with that? It's not for the residents to be going onto public lands to treat for termites. I think that's our responsibility.
I don't know how big of a sort of what's the margin that's how many feet on either side are you talking about?
I'm not going to get into the number of feet. I'm just talking about
Yeah.
there are areas where homeowners are not treating, which to me
Right.
would seem to be the township's responsibility. And what can we do to be treating that?
Well, if we go back a number of years, I forgot it's 10 years or so ago, I did a project for Center Wellington in which we put our traps into public parks and around the city town hall and so forth. It turned out that we just weren't getting the traps in the right area, and that didn't, that kind of an approach where we try and focus on the township's property, I think has been tried, at least maybe not quite in the right areas, but that didn't work all that well. It's critical for this approach that you do an area-wide project, that you really try and do these management area techniques on an area-wide basis. So we could take some of them and phase them in, but that's not going to politically fly because, residents are going to say, well, I don't want to wait for it. I want it now on my property. Why should anybody get it before I get it? So it's a bit of a quandary. I don't know precisely how to proceed.
So
Sorry, Councillor Craig, I'll let you follow up in just a second. I just wanted to remind Council, we're just receiving this for information right now. So let's not go too far down trying to figure out a solution.
Yeah.
We do recognize that we have a challenge. It's a bigger challenge than what we thought, but I really want to make sure that we understand the report because all we're doing today is receiving the report for information.
Okay, excellent.
Councillor McCray?
Okay, I guess just for my own understanding is if Dr. Myles, you could explain the approach that you actually take in actually dealing with a block. I'd like to just understand what your process is. Like, do you include all the residential areas within the block as well as public areas to set your traps? I'm just curious to know.
Usually the blocks are all the public properties. If you're talking about just the boulevard strip, are you trying to clarify the boulevard strip versus the actual?
No, I'm just curious, like say, for example, if we were to look at figure 3, the area on Water Street and Waterloo Street, just that sort of corner, how would you eradicate them? Would you be setting traps on the public properties as well as private properties, or are you just dealing with private properties? I'd just like to understand.
Well, I think we would definitely set traps on both properties.
Okay, thank
Public and private, yes.
Councillor Dunsmore?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Dr. Myles, I'm wondering, it's a bigger problem than you thought it was. So you can imagine what it feels like for us. It's far greater than we had anticipated as well. So being in the business, I'm sure you know other people that are doing similar things or are working to eradicate termites. Would you be able to provide to staff? And I certainly don't want you to make any recommendations here in an open meeting, but provide a list to us of other people that kind of do this thing. And the other question I have for you is what kind of guidance would you give our staff if we were to take this on ourselves? What kind of instructions could you provide to us?
I could give you a list, but there's nobody who does what I do and has the 30 years of experience I do as a researcher. And I think that has a very large impact in our success. So I started at the U of T in 1990 and did a number of projects and all kinds of different things, lab and field work. And so then I've went on to the manager of the termite project for the city of Guelph, and there's hardly any substitute for that actual experience. There's nobody who puts traps in the ground and extracts them and weighs them and does all this sort of thing that I've been doing for 30 years. I can do up to a certain limit, but I wouldn't guarantee the same outcome necessarily.
Okay, but you started your presentation by saying it was a bigger project than you had anticipated, and you're not sure you want to take it on. So where does that leave us? If you want to take it on, it costs us $1 million. If we pay that, will you take it on, or is it still too much for you to do?
I think it's still maybe too much for me to do.
Okay.
Certainly, I wouldn't be able to start it up this year because I'm still busy working for Guelph and I'm starting up another project in Elmira. What we could do if we were to wade into this is some priority stump removal, indoor inspections. We wouldn't get around to any nematode treatments or any even trap installations until next year. I think that's all.
I haven't got any more questions.
Councillor McElwain?
Thanks, Mayor. Last year, when we were having this discussion, briefly talked about a new chemical that has been approved by the government from Dow that had not been delivered in Canada yet at that point, was scheduled to start last November. Just wondering if you know if it has started to be delivered yet, because it, as you called it at that time, would be a game changer. So just wondering if there was any success getting that product into Canada yet that you're aware of.
It's a very curious thing, Councillor. I have tried to follow up with that on a couple of occasions. And I've also talked to other pest control people who are eager to have that product available. And the company remains very strange in the way it replies to our questions. Evidently, it's approved, but they haven't rolled it out. So you go, why would you go to the expense and bother of getting something approved and then not roll it out? I just can't comprehend what's going on. So that's the latest that I've heard. It hasn't been rolled out, whatever that means. I will try again to try and find out more about that.
Second question, if I might. Last year also, we talked, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he runs a termite control company in Toronto, who was the one that told me about Dow, the Dow
Dick
chemical
Murphy.
to begin with. Yes. And he does have a termite control or eradication system. And it sounds like it differs from yours, but is he, I mean, I could give him a call. I still have his number, but is he stay in the GTA, or would he be willing to travel out here, do you think, if you're not able to do it?
I don't think anybody else does area-wide termite control. What his termite control system is a property-specific conventional soil termiticide treatment with borate treatment, and I don't know, maybe he even offers nematodes from time to time. But that, even if he did all the things that I do, if you do it on an individual property, it doesn't work on an area-wide basis. You have to roll it out on an area-wide basis to eliminate colonies.
Thank you.
Councillor Van Leeuwen?
Thanks to you, Mayor. Yeah, what can I say? I'm definitely surprised to see how big the areas are, and I can see the value in doing it as an area-wide project. I think we have some work to do and gathering what our next steps are. I can also understand why Dr. Myles can't seem to make the time. Money doesn't magically make time. So I can understand that whatever the project is, we need someone to focus on it. So I look forward to the next steps from staff. Thanks.
Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. Testing, can you hear me? There we go. Thank you, Mayor. Dr. Myles, a couple of questions if I could. The first one is, I'm wondering if you could tell us, Dr. Myles, what are the factors that cause termites to migrate and to spread? In asking this question, Dr. Myles, I'm wondering if there's things we can do or residents can do to impede or limit the spread from one property to another. Are there certain vectors that cause them to migrate, or things we can do to stop that kind of migration and spread?
Yeah, I'd be happy to address that question. It's a good question. And there definitely are things that you can do. Basically, what it comes down to is what I've preached for decades is what I call yard wood management. And that fundamentally comes down to two major things: get rid of wood chip mulch and replace it with bark mulch, or better yet, sand and gravel or no mulch. And the other thing is focus on stumps and any other kind of large items of dead wood. Now, immediately people want to start taking down all kinds of trees that have scars on them. Don't do that. Because I've done many trees thinking that they need to come down. I see surface tubes on them. Those live trees with a healthy crown, don't touch them. Leave them alone. It's the dead stumps that are already existing in the yard that are absolutely the nesting sites of colonies. That is what you have to focus on. And then the other red carpet that everybody does is put this wood chip mulch right around their foundation. It's just the invitation in. Termites eat wood. It's very simple. We're large organisms. We can see wood. Manage that stuff.
Follow-on question, Councillor Foster?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Linton. Second question, Dr. Myles. This is a significant issue in Ward 3, my ward, and Dr. Myles, you've mentioned how an area-wide approach is needed, and I feel there's a need for collective action rather than individual action, or for fear the termites just migrate from house A to over to house B. So I guess, would you confirm that collective action is needed area-wide? And I'm also thinking, Dr. Myles, about how certain members in the zone are fearful or unwilling to disclose or participate in the surveys. You mentioned that about your surveying. Maybe perhaps, I wonder if you can speak to those residents. Is there anything we can tell them as far as we need to disclose the problem if we're to resolve it? So we need to speak up about it, all of us, especially those in these zones.
Okay, let me take on those questions. I think there are two questions. One is regarding migration. And I think it's not like gypsy moths and many other invasive species that we have large scale migration going on. Here you have a very small expansion from the periphery of the foraging territory of the colony. And that expansion is going on probably at the rate of about one property per year, or 50 feet per year, maybe even less than a property per year. It's a very gradual process of them spreading. So for them to spread and fully occupy a block takes a decade or two. And then they'll finally find some roots underneath the streets between the different blocks, and they'll gradually migrate that way from block to block, that kind of thing. Like all social insects, they produce a winged form every year, and they fly, and they could potentially start new colonies. But those tiny colonies cannot get through a Canadian winter, 6 months of freezing every night. It's a tiny little population. You could crush it with your thumb in the palm of your hand. That kind of a tiny population, only a few inches to a foot below the ground, does not get through the winter. And so we don't have to worry about those colonies. I'm sure they're formed every year and they die every winter. It's the larger colonies that build up within a block and then gradually find a way to get to a new block and then expand and colonize that block and then gradually move to another block. So it's a very slow creeping process. A particular thing about this termite's biology is that it produces a type of reproductive called a nymphoid reproductive. And most termites put all their nymphs into alates that fly out of the colony, but this particular species produces nymphoids. And with the nymphoids, they're able to find every log, every stump, every suitable place for reproduction and start reproducing there. So they have the ability to find all the resources and colonize all those that are suitable for them and make those into reproductive centers. So those are sort of the things you have to understand about their biology. Now, as for people who don't want to participate, I find that they're not very many. They're usually less than 5%. Certainly it was less than 5% in Center Wellington who didn't want us onto their property. The other 95 have got a wonderful positive attitude about what we're doing. And I find it much easier not to worry about that 5%. Just work around them. I've really found that from experience.
Thanks, Dr. Myles. Thanks, councillors. We're receiving this report for information today. Obviously, what we heard today goes beyond what was in the report, about $1 million and a little bit bigger than what we anticipated being. So obviously, if staff, if Randy, if you could work with Dr. Myles to figure out what kind of time commitment he could take and get back to council with some sort of plan of attack, with some sort of phasing to it and some sort of dollar figure behind it. That's when we'll have more discussion on this item. But for now, we're here to receive this report for information. And thanks very much, Dr. Myles, for the report. Even though it isn't great news, it's good to know what really is and make sure that we have that solid foundation of facts to build something around. So this will be coming back to council, but we really do need our staff to work with Dr. Myles to figure out what approach we can take with this. With that, I'm going to read the recommendation that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington receives for information a summary of the public consultation program for the state. Oh, no, never mind. Recommendation of the Council of the Township of Center Wellington receives the Termite Survey report preparation by Termite Research Services, Inc. for information. Can I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Dunsmore, second by Councillor McCray. All in favor? And that is carried. Stay tuned for more. Thank you very much again, Dr. Myles, for that. Moving on to consideration of reports, St. David Street reconstruction, and we have a summary of our public consultation program. And again, just to remind council, we're taking a very stepped approach, very phased approach to this project. No decisions on this project are going to be made again today. This is to provide council with information that came out of our public consultation process. And the public consultation process is just one aspect of the different research that has gone on for this very important infrastructure renewal project. So with that, I will turn things over to Adam. You want to start, or Colin?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor Linton.
Okay.
I can get started here. Members of council. So I'm sharing my screen now. Can everybody see the presentation?
Yeah, we can see it.
Fantastic, thank you. Council will recall in February, we presented report IS 2020-104, where we presented 4 conceptual design options for the St. David Street reconstruction project. So the purpose of this report and presentation today is to present to you the results of a public consultation program that we undertook in March and April, and to discuss some of the broader kind of policy framework here at the township as it relates to reconstruction of streets. So this map shows the project location. So you can see here, we're starting at the northern limit of the intersection of St. David Street, St. Andrew Street, extending up to Garifraxis Street, and then finally northwards onto Edinburgh Ave. So some background. So the project is planned for construction in 2023. We plan on submitting a Connecting Links grant application to the MTO for funding. So it's contingent on successful application for that grant funding. It's a full reconstruction project. It includes replacement of the road and the sidewalks, water main, sanitary sewers, storm sewers, currently at the end of their service life. And the infrastructure within this area has been identified as a high priority under the township's asset management plan, 2016 asset management plan. As we all know, this is part of Highway 6, part of the Fergus downtown core. And as such, it's a very important regional local mobility corridor. It's an economic hub for local businesses. And it's a gateway really into our community, into Center Wellington's cultural and architectural heritage. So I wanted to provide an overview of the conceptual design options that we presented in February and that we presented to the public as part of this consultation process. So option 1 was to replace existing. So essentially match and replace the existing vehicle travel lanes, on-street parking lanes, boulevards, and sidewalks. Option 2 was to remove the on-street parking lanes and to increase boulevard and sidewalk width. We would also be slightly increasing the vehicle travel lanes under this option and adding decorative features to the streetscape like tree plantings and decorative light standards. Option 3 was to maintain on-street parking between St. Andrew Street and St. Patrick Street, also increase the width of boulevards and sidewalks and include decorative features. Under this option, we'd also be slightly increasing the vehicle travel lane width. And then finally, option 4 was an option which presented separated cycling lanes from on St. David Street, from St. Andrew Street to Hill Street, and unseparated cycling lanes north of Hill Street. Under this option, we would maintain on-street parking, an area we designated as highly utilized on-street parking on the west side of St. David Street. And we'd also be increasing the width of boulevards and sidewalks, including decorative features. And under this option, we would be reducing travel lane widths from approximately 4.5 to 3.5 meters. So the consultation program consisted of an open house we held from March 2nd to March 28th. So this was a virtual open house and online survey. We posted signage at the corner of the intersection of St. David and St. Andrew advertising the open house. We held meetings with the Healthy Growth Advisory Committee and the Downtown Fergus BIA and the Elora Cataract Trailway Association to obtain their feedback. We also had correspondence with the Ministry of Transportation, the MTO, and with Green Lanes, a local active transportation advocacy group. I would say the public consultation was highly successful in getting a large volume of feedback from a real diverse group of stakeholders. We had over 750 responses to the online survey. We also received emails, and we know there was substantial traffic on the website on Connect CW. So I'm going to provide you with the next few slides here, just an overview of some of the things we heard and some of the data from the public open house, the online survey. So this first graph here, the question was, how does this project relate to you? So the options were, I live in Fergus, I live in the project area, I own a business on St. David Street, or I drive, walk, or cycle on St. David Street. So we just wanted to gauge, are these users of the roadway? And so the key point here is that there was only 5.5% of respondents that indicated none of the above. So we can assume that, about 94.5% of respondents do have some connection to the roadway, are users of the roadway. So, the feedback is that we're receiving is very meaningful. So which conceptual design option do you prefer? We had 41.6% of respondents indicate option 1. So that's the replace existing option. Option 2, the remove on-street parking and widen boulevard sidewalk width option. We had 10.8%. Option 3, 27.9%. Option 3 was the maintain on-street parking from St. Andrew to St. Patrick. Widen boulevards and sidewalks. And then finally, option 4, 15.9% for the separated cycling lanes and 4.4% indicated other. So what aspects of the project are most important to you? So the options that they could select here were maximizing on-street parking, improving sidewalks and walkability, adding dedicated cycling lanes, improving the visual appearance of the street, reducing vehicle speeds, improving the flow of vehicle traffic, or other. So the top 3 responses that we received were: number 1, maximize on-street parking; number 2, improving the visual appearance of the street; and number 3, improving sidewalks and walkability. So we've summarized here some of the major themes related to the feedback on the next few slides. So those are in bold. And I've also included some quotes here that were quotes that we received from folks who completed the survey. I won't read all the quotes. I'll focus more on the themes here. So the first one is improving accessibility to the downtown for aging populations or others with special mobility needs. Adding trees and decorative features that improve the appearance of the street and complement cultural and architectural heritage. Moving on here, ensuring adequate parking spaces are available. Traffic calming and diverting truck traffic. Improving walkability and making the street more oriented to pedestrians. Adding cycling lanes that are safe and user-friendly with the goal of creating a larger urban cycling network. Improving street crossings for cyclists and pedestrians. Ensuring that intersections are designed and signalized to accommodate safe turning movements and controlling project costs. And I should note that we've posted a detailed report of the feedback received on Connect CW. If you're interested to go on and actually read through the comments that were received. So there's a St. David Street, Reimagine Your St. David Street webpage on Connect CW. So our meetings with the Downtown Fergus BIA and the Healthy Growth Advisory Committee. So some of the key discussion items from those meetings. So addressing issues with vehicles cutting through private driveways and parking areas at intersections. Minimizing the project duration and impacts to businesses during construction, avoiding the closure of driveways or parking areas during construction, adding more parking in other areas to offset the potential loss of on-street parking on St. David Street, ensuring that intersections can still accommodate turning movements for all vehicles, including heavy trucks. Continuing here with the feedback from those meetings, diverting truck traffic away from the downtown core, identifying cycling routes on side streets with less vehicle traffic and improving the safety of crossings of St. David Street North for pedestrians and cyclists, and the benefits of wider walkways and bike lanes for people with special mobility needs. The positive impacts of expanding cycling networks on the number of people that visit downtown and potential benefits for businesses, and growing the urban tree canopy through the addition of street trees. We also had a meeting with the Elora Cataract Trailway Association. So some of the key items discussed there were an interest in adding pedestrian cyclist crossing of St. David Street at or around Hill Street, or improving existing crossing at Agarifraxa Street to improve safety and east-west mobility for cyclists and pedestrians crossing St. David Street. The possibility of a future, a larger future urban cycling network, which would include connections on St. David Street, north of Edinburgh, perhaps to side road 19 or 18, and then on St. Andrew Street, extending east of St. David Street, perhaps to Garchore Street. And there's also an interest in continuing with the separated cycle lanes north of Garifraxa to project limit. So under option 4, we propose just the separated cycle lanes to Hill Street and Garifraxa, and some interest in extending those farther north. So we also corresponded with the MTO. So we exchanged some emails with them. They essentially indicated to us that this segment of St. David Street is within an area that's designated as connecting link. And as such, the design details are determined primarily by the municipality, but that they will continue to be involved in the process going forward as the project progresses. So shifting focus now away from the consultation program and towards our existing policy framework here at the township. So we have some key policy documents. So notably the council strategic plan and the transportation master plan. And so the recommended option is also going to take into consideration that policy framework that we've developed here at the township. So some of these policies include ensuring that the street is designed, constructed, operated, maintained for all users and all modes of travel in accordance with the complete streets policy as outlined in our transportation master plan. Identifying opportunities to incorporate safe, active transportation facilities which encourage walking and cycling. And finally, exploring traffic calming opportunities to encourage drivers to reduce their rate of speed, which makes the roadway safer for all users. We've pulled together some high-level costing. At this stage, the purpose of the high-level costing is really just to compare and contrast differences between the options. So it's very high level at this stage, but we wanted to present to council. So option 1, the total estimated cost, high-level cost, 3.9 million. So that's for everything for roads and drainage, sewers, and water. We estimate that of this, there would be approximately 550,000, which would be eligible for the Connecting Links grant funding, which would leave an estimated 1.875 million impact to the tax supported budget. So that's after taking out the water and sewer rate supported portion of the budget and the Connecting Links funding. That's the remaining portion of the budget that would be tax supported. Option 2, slightly higher than option 1, 3.955 million. And that's with an estimated 2.05 million impact to the tax supported budget. Option 3, 3.925 million with an estimated 2.01 impact to the tax supported budget. Option 4, 4.015 million with an estimated 2.11 impact to the tax supported budget. So what we can see from these cost estimates and comparing them, there's not much of a spread between the options. They're actually all within a relatively narrow cost range. So not much of a significant difference in the high level costing between the options at this stage. So it should be noted that these estimates are higher than what's budgeted currently in the 2021 capital budget. The higher cost estimates can be attributed in part to we're seeing a general trend towards higher costs for labor and materials. And you know, I think this is something that that different municipalities across Ontario are seeing currently. So we've tried to increase our unit rates to account for this rising trend in labor and material costs. We have a new on-site and excess soil management regulation in Ontario, which has recently come into effect, which places additional soil testing and management requirements on municipal infrastructure projects. So this increases the cost of soil management. We factored this into our estimate. And finally, given that at this stage, the designs are still very conceptual, there's uncertainty with respect to the scope of each option and the specific cost items. So we've tried to prepare a conservative estimate and trying to capture all foreseeable costs. These estimates will be refined after establishing a recommended option during the detailed design phase of the project through the annual budget process. So based on the public consultation, based on our policy framework, we've tried to take away, you know, what are the key things that we want to be considering in selecting a preferred conceptual design option. So the option should balance the transportation needs of vehicles, cyclists, and pedestrians, while still enhancing the appearance of the streetscape and ensuring the number of highly utilized parking spaces are maintained to the extent possible. Improving safety of pedestrian cyclist crossings of St. David Street North is also an important consideration for the recommended conceptual option. Our next steps, so we'll be reporting back to council in June with a recommended conceptual design option, and we'll then proceed with detailed design and submission of an application for funding under the Connecting Links program in the fall. I thank you very much for your time, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks very much, Adam. Great presentation and great report. One of the slides that stands out to me is slide 10, when you look at what this project is trying to do and the aspects of the project that are most important to the people that we surveyed. Talking about maximizing online parking, on-street parking, improving visual experience, cycle lanes, reduce speeds, improve sidewalks, walkability. A lot of different factors are going into this one redesign project, and it's already an existing road. It's not a brand new road. So we're trying to do an awful lot with this. So appreciate the infrastructure services team going out and getting some really good feedback from citizens, because I think that really is important. I know, everybody knows we can't please everybody with something like this, but we really wanted to make sure that we got as much feedback as possible. Turn it over to, and again, to members of council, we're not making a decision today on this. We really want to make sure that we have lots of time to think this through, get your feedback, and have staff go through these options and bring a recommendation back to council. So wanted to turn it over to council for your questions and comments. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Adam, for a most excellent report. I guess my question, Adam, the crux of my question is, the survey is telling us a clear, I guess I'll use the word majority of respondents are concerned about the loss of parking. So I guess I'm wondering, Adam, is there a way to, help meet the needs of the cycling community without losing parking? And I'm thinking about things like, if we start with you've got a very busy road with very high traffic volumes. There's things like the one option has segregated bike lanes, and I'm wondering about lanes that are not segregated. One of the options speaks to increasing the width of the traffic lanes by 0.3 of a meter, which is 30 centimeters. That's approximately the width of bicycle handlebars. So when you put all those things together, Adam, I'm wondering how or if there's a way we can meet the needs of cyclists and merchants and those people who are concerned about the loss of parking. Any thoughts on that, Adam, with respect to those kinds of matters, segregated, non-segregated, etc.?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Litton, and thank you very much, Councillor Foster, for the question. I think, Councillor Foster, with option 4, we really have tried to toe that line where we are trying to maintain as much parking as possible while still having a safe, separated cycling facility. So one of the things we've been learning as we've been going through this and looking at different design options for cycling facilities is that, having, for example, the cycling facility on the passenger side door of the parked vehicles is a lot safer. Right, because you have most people who are, single occupancy in vehicles, they're opening the driver's side door, not the passenger side door typically. So there are different safety considerations we've kind of factored into trying to maximize the parking as much as possible, but have safe cycling facilities. So I do think option 4 kind of walks that line a little bit, but I think absolutely, as we get more into the detail with the detailed design, there might be other options to try and maximize on-street parking, whichever option is recommended.
Councillor Foster, following.
Thank you, Mayor. Supplementary question, Adam. Specific to bike lanes, must they be? I realize it's obvious why you would want them segregated, but is it absolutely essential in this case that they must be segregated? And I guess what I mean by that is, you know, the extra 30 centimeters, could we consider not having segregated bike lanes, but painting the bike logos on the street as a visual reminder to motorists that cyclists are using the road as well? Are there any other options for bike lanes besides segregated bike lanes in this particular place? I realize it's very busy.
Yes, through you, Mayor Linton. Thanks again, Councilor Foster, for the question. So what we've been using to kind of guide our design is the Ontario Traffic Manual. So based on the guidance under the Ontario Traffic Manual, you look at, you know, the volume of traffic on a street and the type of vehicle traffic on a street, and based on that, there can be a recommendation to go with the separated facilities versus the non-separated separated facilities. So we did take a look at that, and we feel that based on the volume of traffic and the type of traffic, the mix of traffic on the street, it really is, for safety reasons, it really should be separated facilities in this area. Now that said, you know, again, I think we can look at different options, but I think the safety is obviously top of mind, and in order to protect those cyclists using the lanes, a separated facility would be the best option in that area of St. David Street.
But just to be clear, there are options presented here that don't have separated bike lanes, so that's something that is being looked at as well. Councilor Van Leeuwen?
Thanks, through you, Mayor. Thanks for this report. Are we able to have bike lanes only on one side and kind of mix these options? Also, second question, I'm curious, when we're looking at this report, have we considered also other streets for bike lanes off of the main highway? So even though we're scoping and kind of saying, what do we want this one to look like? Are we also kind of broadening our eyes and going, okay, we really want to keep that on-street parking. What other streets are wide enough to maybe put that cycling lane on that even could be a safer street? Are we considering that at the same moment? Thanks.
Yeah, so through you, Mayor Linton, thanks very much, Councilor Van Leeuwen, for the question there. So the first part of your question, cycling lanes on one side, yes, that is an option. There are some designs where you can do that. You have kind of two-way traffic on a cycling lane on one side of the road. We felt like for this application, that maybe wasn't the best option. We think it might confuse motorists, pedestrians, and cyclists a little bit. So yes, that is an option. It is something that we looked at. We felt like in this case that perhaps wasn't the best option. And the second part of your question, and I apologize, it escapes me what the second part of your question was.
Other streets, like are we, even though we're designing this street, perhaps when we look at it, do we take into consideration that maybe there's a better street for bike lanes, and then we would go forward? That would influence our decision a little bit going forward of just keeping on-street parking. If there's an option, a better option or acceptable option for a better bike lane on a street over, perhaps that's less busy.
Yes, thank you very much. And through you, Mayor Linton. So yes, we have considered kind of cycling traffic on the side streets. That was something that came up through the feedback. Certainly was an interest in having some of the cycling traffic on those less busy side streets. I think we're focused here on the opportunity, and we're reconstructing St. David Street, so that really is the opportunity that presents itself, from a cycling network perspective. So I think that by looking at an option of cycling lanes on St. David, it perhaps doesn't take away from the option of having additional traffic on some of those side streets, but really I think that is the opportunity that's presenting itself here.
Councilor McElwain?
Thanks, Mayor. Actually the biggest differential in the different pricing options is the amount eligible for grant funding, or potentially eligible for grant funding. Why is there $125,000 difference, or something like that, difference between the different options for the grant funding? And is is that kind of a maximum grant funding that we can expect? I was disappointed when I saw it was only that amount. I was kind of, I guess, based upon our previous, I thought the grant funding was going to be a lot larger percentage of the total, so.
Yeah, so through you, Mayor Linton, thank you, Councillor McElwain, for the question. So I should note that the grant funding figures that we've provided are just our estimate at this time of what might be eligible for grant funding. So we're not there; they are high level, and we're not entirely sure that they're, you know, that's what the funding will be. But we tried to provide an estimate, you know, to compare and contrast the options again. The differences relate to just the kind of the scope of the project that would be eligible for grant funding. I think kind of the rule of thumb is that, you know, the MTO will provide grant funding to kind of replace the existing roadway. But if we're considering, you know, widening the curb and sidewalks, that would be, you know, more of the costing would be borne by the township in that case. So that explains kind of the variation in grant funding between the options. You know, I think we'll have a better idea, obviously, of what the funding, the eligible funding might be as we prepare that application submitted in the fall.
Councillor Dunsmore?
Yeah, it was interesting. The public engagement you had gave them 4 options, and I know 41% wanted to do nothing, but that means that the remaining population wanted some kind of a change, but we gave them 3 other options to choose from. So I'm wondering if we had it down to less options, what kind of, where the numbers would go from there. So when you bring this back to us, are you giving us 1 option when you bring it back, or are you going to give us 2 options to choose from? Or what's the process going to be going forward?
Through you, Mayor Linton, thank you, Councillor Dunsmore. So the approach when we come back in June will be to recommend 1 option.
Good. Is there any, are you reaching out to any more people? Are we done with the public engagement on this? Are there any, once you get narrow it down to whether it's what it is you want to do, are you going to reach back out one more time to people or not?
Yes, through you, Mayor Linton. I think formally we're through with the public consultation process. That's not to say that, you know, we're still kind of receiving emails and feedback that way that we're not considering that feedback. We certainly are. And I think that, you know, as the design progresses also through the project, you know, there will be additional kind of touch points with the public as we kind of move through the project. So the public consultation will be ongoing, but I think the big push as it relates to the conceptual design options is somewhat wrapped up.
Councillor McCray?
Thank you, Mayor Linton. Through you, Adam. I have a couple of questions. First one is perhaps you could give us an update on negotiations with the province concerning the truck bypass, where we stand with that. I think that would be helpful for all of us to know.
I think Colin's got that one. You're off the hook, Adam.
There we go. Yeah, thanks for your question, Councillor McRae through Mayor Linton. Yeah, they're going well. We've submitted our permit application. We have to do an encroachment permit to install the signs, the truck bypass signs on Highway 6 at County Road 17 to the north and County Road 7 to the south of Fergus. The signs are sitting in the shop. You may have noticed we have the kind of en route signage already installed on County Road 7 and 17. And just thanks to the county for helping us out with that installation. And so just waiting for the piece of paper, basically from the MTO to give us the green light to install. So I'm hopeful to get that any day now. And of course, we have locates ordered to put the posts in. MTO has given us approval to actually do the sign installations with our own forces on Highway 6, which is great. So we're ready. Materials are here. It's just getting that piece of paper, the actual final permit from MTO. That's all we're waiting for at this time.
Councillor McCray?
Yeah, I guess, thank you for that, Colin. So do we have an idea of what percentage of trucks we might lose through the bypass?
Yeah, it's tough to tell. You know, I don't think we have a number exactly, like what would be considered local traffic in terms of truck numbers versus what's moving more regionally and might look at looking at using the bypass. Yeah, it would be difficult to tell. Certainly, as we get more data or traffic counts are updated, we will definitely have a better idea over time. We are collecting traffic count data this past week on Highway 6 through Fergus, but at this stage, yeah, we don't know for sure what kind of numbers we'll see in terms of trucks bypassing Fergus using 7 and 17.
Councilor Craig, follow on.
Yes. When I'm considering this, I can't help but think that in about 20 years, we're going to be at 52,000 people. And what do we want our downtown to be? I've driven through lots of small towns that have become small cities, and some of the downtowns have been quite appealing in terms of making it look like a destination where you want to stop and investigate, and others that just seem to be dying and you just want to hurry on through. So I think as we're considering whatever option we're going to go with, it's thinking longer term in terms of 20 years out, and we're at 52,000 people. How are we going to continue to attract people to our downtown? And it sounds like active transportation is something we definitely have to look at, and that's cycling, pedestrian access. The other thing too, I've heard a lot about is concern about having more pedestrian cycling crossings on St. David Street. So that might be an option to get more cycling in the downtown, is having other places, maybe Hill Street, St. George Street, where we have crossings. I've been cycling down those streets quite frequently in the last several weeks, just experiencing what it's like trying to cross over St. David. I can only imagine when COVID finally leaves us and we have everyone heading up to their cottages, how long it's going to take to try and get across St. David. So just something for us to consider.
Thanks very much, councillors. Again, thanks to staff for providing these options for us to consider over the next month, and it'll come back to us and we'll have additional discussion on this, I'm sure. I'm going to put the recommendation on the floor. A recommendation of the Council of Township of Center Wellington receive for information a summary of the public consultation program for the St. David Street, St. Andrew Street to Edinburgh Avenue reconstruction project as outlined in report number IS 2021-10 dated May 17th, 2021. Can I have a move to that recommendation, please? Councillor Dunsmore, seconded by Councillor McCray. Any last comments on this? Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to, I'm wondering if we can consider, I happen to very much agree with Councillor Dunsmore, one option or two options, and we know the infrastructure part has to be done. That part is a given, and I'm just wondering, is there a way, you know, when you look at the various options and the feedback from the public, I see this as the options with maintaining the parking and the options that focus more on beautification and cycling lanes. So I'm just wondering, Mayor, can we consider to have two options presented down the road rather than just one? One with the status quo and the infrastructure and the parking, and one with a deeper dive into beautification, bike lanes, etc. Because I think Councillor Dunsmore has a point with four options. It's, if we could narrow it down to just two options, that might help us in our deliberations.
Yeah, I think I didn't hear that was Councillor Dunsmore's idea. I just heard him saying what was the process going forward. Anyway, I think that staff have laid out options for us. My personal preference is for them to identify their professional opinion based on their preferred option. Council isn't bound by that. If council wants to choose another option, or if council wants to make modifications, that's council's purview to do something like that. But my preference as a rule, if I'm going forward for staff, is to recommend what they prefer as the best option based on the criteria they select as the professionals. So I I like the process as it's laid out. Obviously, this is at the will of council, but I think this process that we're going through right now is best suited for making the best decision, and council has that option of making their choice when it comes to us in June. But I like staff providing their preferred option. I wouldn't mind hearing from other councils on that. Councilor Dunbar?
Yeah, no, I wasn't suggesting that we bring it back. I was asking what staff was planning on doing, whether they were giving us the option to it. I mean, the problem with these surveys is 750 people responded, and there are 28,000 residents in this community. So the large majority of the community leaves this in our hands. I just want to make sure that we get as much information as we can from staff. I think there were great comments made today that they can take into account. And the fact that Adam has said that there will be an ongoing process where people are still communicating with the staff and they can get their input that way, I'm quite happy with that. I'm anxious to get this project moving forward, because I agree with Councillor McRae. We have to make a decision based on this that reflects on a community 20 years out.
All in favor? Oh. And that's carried. Okay, moving on to 7.2, McDonald funding project recommendations. Right off the bat, I wanted to thank this committee for all the important work they're doing. I watched the last meeting that they went through, and they have done a lot of work for us, especially on this McDonald Trust thing. So appreciate all their volunteer hours on this. And with that, I'll turn things over to our Managing Director of Community Services, Pat Newson.
I have to just admit, I missed the last 2 minutes of that meeting. I got bumped off my internet, but I think you're asking me to present my report, so I will start to do that. In February, staff brought to council an update on the McDonald projects. There were 6 of the 8 projects not completed for a variety of reasons, and staff needed council's direction to proceed. Council requested that CSAC review the incomplete projects and bring back recommendations, and this is the report you're seeing today. The recommendations were around timing of each project, requests for changes in project scope, recommendations for any funding not used as a result of a project not being able to proceed, and any other recommendations. So CSAC used 3 meetings to review each project, and they received written updates from each of the groups, and they spoke to a number of the groups. The sculpture project requires a bit more time for CSAC to review. However, CSAC was ready to make recommendations on 5 of the projects. So with that in mind, CSAC has asked for more time to continue to consult with the sculpture project and bring that recommendation back at a future meeting, but did not want to hold up the other projects from making from council considering the recommendations. Attached to the report is a summary table which is probably the simplest way for us to go through the status and recommendations of CSAC. I'm not sure if that's if we're able to share that document. Perfect. Thank you. So I'll just go through them quickly. Obviously, I'll answer any questions as soon as I'm finished. The Bungalow 55 project. Staff have confirmed that the Bungalow 55 facility no longer exists and the community group is no longer active. So this project was to make improvements to the facility so it can no longer proceed. They were awarded $23,195. And after speaking to the groups and reviewing information, CSAC recommends allocating that $23,195 to the Bissell Park multi-surface project. Based on their needs to complete both phases of that project, and felt that this reaches the largest community use and impact. The Bissell Park multi-surface rehabilitation project was awarded $350,000. It has mostly been delayed due to COVID restrictions. That project was, as they put it, relying on a lot of sweat equity from volunteers. And with COVID not allowing gatherings, they have not been permitted to get together and do the work. So depending on the lifting of those restrictions, they look at completing that project either this year or next year. and that's was satisfactory to CSAC. The Elora Center for the Arts and Riverfest application, their original ask was funding contribution to Performing Arts Center. And then when CSAC reviewed that application back in 2018, they awarded $100,000 to do a feasibility study for that Performing Arts Center. CSAC received a request for change in scope of the project and agreed that they could proceed with a performance pavilion on the Elora Center for the Arts property, as this intent is similar to the original ask. And they requires neighborhood engagement, sound mitigation, site approvals, building permit, and any other necessary approvals. The Elora Center for the Arts Building Improvement Project received $380,000, and they had come to council a couple of times, most recently, to use that funding to leverage a grant from Canada Cultural Spaces Grant, and council approved that request. So they're waiting to hear the results of that grant application. So the project will either proceed with the enhanced renovations if that grant is successful. If that grant is not successful, then the project will go back to its original scope of renovation and be completed with the funds available. So ultimately, regardless of the outcome of the grant, they intend to complete that project by 2023. KIP Elora received $35,000. The ask was to connect wastewater to the site, and it was evident that this funding was not going to be enough to complete that project. So they put a request to change the scope of the project to install a shade structure at the site, which is a similar intent, which is to improve the infrastructure of the site. CSAC recommends approving this project and the change of scope, and provide the project cost estimates will be slightly higher than the $35,000, but the group indicated that they have already done the fundraising in place to complete this project. It does require permits from both the township and the GRCA. And then their plan is to build that and complete the project in 2021. So I don't know if you need to continue sharing that screen, but that is a summary of where the status of the projects are. I'm happy to answer any questions. The recommendations you're seeing is quite a long one, so I hope Mayor Woollington has a lot of readiness to read the long recommendation, but this committee took this very seriously, and I want to thank them for their input to this project. Thank you.
Yes, I want to thank them as well. This is a lot of work for them to take a first stab at these things, and we really appreciate all the work that they do. I'm going to start with Councillor Dunsmore as the representative for this committee, and then we'll go around the room for any questions from council. Councillor Dunsmore.
Thank you. Through your mayor. Yeah, Pat's absolutely right. The committee took a long time to come up with these. They took 3 meetings. They did their due diligence. It's a good group of citizens that have made some really good recommendations, and we had some really healthy discussions on a lot of these. And so I'll speak in favor of this because the committee put it together. I think they did a great job, and they put a lot of thought into it. So that's about all I've got to say.
Thanks, Councillor Dunsmore. Make sure that you pass on our thanks from council to that group. Councillor McCray.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. I don't have any questions. I appreciate the effort of the committee to deal with this and come back with a recommendation, and I certainly support it.
Councillor McAway.
Thanks, Mayor. I also support, I'm happy to see things going forward as they are, and seeing the Bungalow 55 money going over to the Bissell Park project is a very positive move. The only thing I wanted to do was highlight some fairly major errors made at both CSAC and in the newspaper in the last week about the Elora Sculpture project. There is no split in the Elora Sculpture project committee. The sculpture committee has been going forward, and they would have had the project completed by the end of last year, except staff are insisting on putting something around the bridge, and there's no room around the bridge. And the sculpture project recommended doing it in Victoria Park instead. And I mean, basically the sculpture project came forward with a recommendation for a piece of art for the people of Elora, not a memorial to Mr. McDonald. We already have a $4 million bridge named after Mr. McDonald. So a $25,000 sculpture is not a major impact. And it's really unfortunate that the delays now have meant that the sculpture project has lost a couple of members, and we just don't have the resources right now to finish the project. And so we have had to say no to completing it. And I don't know what's going to go. I mean, we have been doing this now for 10 years with sculptures. We have a reputation across the country, and we have representation from across the country in our sculpture committee or sculpture project in town this year. And so it's a shame that this has been driven to this point of potential no completion, and certainly not by the sculpture project.
Councillor Van Leeuwen, I'll come back to you, Councillor Dunbar. Councillor Van Leeuwen?
Sorry. Yeah, I don't have any questions. I would reiterate some of the words that were by the previous people. I appreciate the work the committee does, and I'm very thankful that council didn't have to work through them individually, but that we can have recommendations, and good recommendations, from a citizen group and a committee. So thanks for the work.
Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. No substantive questions. Just happy to see potentially advancing the Bissell Park project, including the improvement to the sports facility there, the outdoor rink. That's good news. Hope to see that come to fruition. No questions.
Councillor Dunsmore?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, Councillor McElwain. Staff brought the sculpture project location to the CSAC committee, and they were unbiased in their presentation to the CSAC committee. It was the CSAC committee, through a long discussion, decided that they weren't happy with the Victoria Park option. So it wasn't a staff thing, it was a committee thing. And that's why the committee is anxious to review it again and meet with the sculpture committee and see how we can move this forward, because they do think that creating that sculpture project is something that's good for this community. They just did not like the location.
Councillor McLean?
Thanks, Mayor. I don't know where Councillor Dunsmore got that information, but if he read the written submission by the sculpture project that went to CSAC this spring, it highly recommended the Victoria Parks location, and it's the same one we've been saying for a year and a half now. And there is no question about that. There is no member of the committee that does not want the sculpture did not want the sculpture to be installed in Victoria Park.
Okay, I'm going to read the very long recommendation. The Council of the Township of Centre Wellington approved the recommendations from the Community Services Advisory Committee regarding the Jack R. McDonald project as follows. That the Community Services Advisory Committee recommends Council enter into an agreement with KIP to fund the installation of an outdoor shade structure for completion in 2021, pending a building permit from the Township and approval from the Grand River Conservation Authority and any other necessary approvals, and that KIP utilize the $35,000 McDonald Trust funding for the project, and any additional expenses will be covered by KIP through fundraising. And that the Community Services Advisory Committee recommends to Council the Bissell Project Park to replace the multi-use pad, proceed as prescribed in the executed agreement for completion in 2021 or 2022. And that the committee recommends Council redistribute the $23,195 allocated to Bungalow 55 to the Bissell Park project to assist in the completion of phases 1 and 2. and that the Community Services Advisory Committee recommends to council the approval of the Elora Center for the Arts and the Riverfest Outdoor Performance Pavilion project and enter into an agreement which includes a plan for sound and noise control, including neighborhood engagement, a green space plan, a parking plan, and subject to any other necessary approval. And that the Community Services Advisory Committee recommends to council the Elora Center for the Arts Building Enhancements and Accessibility Project proceed as planned with targeted completion date of 2023. And that the Community Services Advisory Committee recommends council provide an extension to afford the committee an opportunity to further review the Elora sculpture project. Mover for that, please. Councillor Dunsmore, seconded by Councillor McCray. All in favor? And that is carried. Again, thanks very much to the CSAC committee for all the good work. 7.3, amendments to the countywide parking bylaw. I'll turn things over to our clerk.
Yes, through you, Mayor Linton, staff at the County of Wellington, in cooperation with the area municipal clerks, recognized a need to update the countywide parking bylaw to reflect legislative changes to the Highway Traffic Act. Definitions were updated and added, such as changing words, such as disabled to accessible, adding vehicles for hire, and provisions added for time parking in municipal lots. In addition to the changes to the main bylaw, staff from Infrastructure Services took this opportunity to also update the schedules to add no parking zones, electric vehicle parking stations, 15-minute parking, and angle parking. My report noted a bus stop at O'Brien Park. However, the bus stop has since been relocated to the Elora Community Centre.
Thanks very much, Terry. Questions from council? Councilor McCray?
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. Yeah, I have one question. I think it's more just for the general public to understand, is if staff could explain the reasons for why they are banning parking on one side of, I'd say probably the majority of our streets, and as to the decision, which side of the street they choose.
Turn that over to Colin.
Through Mayor Linton. So there are a lot of factors go into play in determining which side the no parking side is. Typically, we're looking at, not just one block at a time, but a series of blocks, and trying to be consistent throughout the whole length of the road in terms of which side the parking is on. Really, the goal is to have a consistent center line for that street across multiple blocks. And really, we're trying to ensure we have adequate space, adequate width for emergency services vehicles to make sure that they can get through and respond in a timely fashion to emergencies, and we don't have cars kind of parking on both sides, blocking access for emergency services. So a lot of factors come into play. Another example is the bump outs that we have implemented recently in some of our new road reconstructions, new subdivisions as well. The bump outs now are, for example, Holborn Street has the bump outs on them. So we're trying to keep the parking onto one side with the bump outs, and then keeping that consistent throughout the entire length of the street.
Councillor Dunsmore?
No, I'm happy with the report. I have no questions.
Councillor McElwain?
Just following up on the previous question, Colin, was there any notification given to citizens at all about the fact that all of a sudden the parking that they've been using for the last 20 years is no longer going to be available to them? Or in the case of York Street, it is a specific one that I'm very aware of, because I think everybody there has contacted me in the last 3 weeks, because all of a sudden traffic or parking moved from one side of the street to the other with no notification. And this is, I mean, it's quite an impact on the people who have lived there for 20 years, because a brand new subdivision beside them has got bump outs in the wrong side of the street. It seems to be very intrusive on their life. And I'm just wondering, I have not heard of any notification going out to all of these citizens that that it was going to get impacted like it did.
Yeah, through Mayor Linton. So unfortunately, Rob, I'll have to check with Rob as to what the notification process was as part of that. I don't know off the top of my head if hand delivered notices were delivered as part of that change. But yeah, you mentioned the bump outs and the traffic calming measures, the devices that we're incorporating into new streets. Definitely were included on York Street from Victoria to Waterloo on the north side, and also on within the Haylock subdivision. It will also have those bump outs for traffic calming on the north side. So when we looked at that, we've got basically two segments of York with those traffic calming bump outs. And so just making that consistent throughout, keeping the parking on the same side, just less confusing for drivers and safer as well, just so that we don't have vehicles kind of going back and forth. We won't have a painted center line on these streets, so keeping the parking on consistent on one side was better from a safety perspective.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor McLean.
Thanks. Just in that particular case of York Street, though, Colin, I mean, the people between Bridge Street and those two blocks there have been living there for more than 20 years, whereas the new subdivisions could have been redesigned to match their side street parking instead of changing them to match the new subdivision. So that I'm just curious why that happened, number one, but number two, why they didn't receive any notification it was going to happen.
Yeah, through Mayor Linton. So as we're looking at new subdivision design, we're trying to maximize on-street parking wherever possible. The number of spaces on street could be at a premium, and where you've got side yards and intersecting streets, you have an opportunity to add more parking, and so that's been the approach that we've taken for Haylock as well as Grandwood, looking at where we can maximize the number of spaces, and again, based on that, looking at the consistency throughout York, just keeping that the same throughout. So
Councillor Van Leeuwen?
I have no questions. Thanks.
Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. No questions for me either.
Okay, I will read the recommendation that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington authorize the Mayor and Clerk to execute a bylaw to amend parking bylaw 5000-05 as amended and repeal bylaw 2020-10 as outlined in report COR 2021-22 from the Manager of Legislative Services and Municipal Clerk. Mover for that, please. Councillor McLean, seconded by Councillor Dunsmore. Any other comments? Councillor McLean?
Trying to get your attention to ask the question beforehand. I had another question for Colin, or possibly for Carrie, I suppose. One of the charts shows time limited parking there's one for Elora and one for Fergus, but it includes in there the areas with no parking. And I'm just curious why the no parking was included in the time limited parking chart, because it doesn't seem to fit. I mean, it seems to be two separate charts, that's all.
Okay, I'll turn that to Colin. It's his schedule. Colin, do you have an answer for that?
I'm just bringing up. So are you referring to Schedule I?
Yeah,
Yes.
Schedule I.
Schedule I? Okay.
Colin, is there any way that you can get a little closer to your mic? You're a little faint.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'll have to go back to Rob again. He kind of ran with this one to update it. So I'll have to get back to you on a response, Councillor McElwain, and it's perhaps something I can email all of council after the meeting after I follow up with Rob.
Thanks, Colin. All in favor? And that is carried. Moving on to negotiated award, hydraulic rescue equipment, and I'll turn things over to our Managing Director of Corporate Service and Treasurer, Dan Wilson. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. This report is in regards to the purchase of hydraulic fire rescue equipment. We have Jonathan Carn, our Deputy Fire Chief, on as well to help address any technical questions that council may have. This is equipment for the Elora station that we budgeted for in the 2021 budget. You'll see from the financial analysis, we budgeted $62,500 for this equipment, and it's coming in well below that. Normally, we would do a quotation process for this level of purchase, but given the consistency in training and from a safety perspective, it's been requested that the Elora station purchase the same equipment that the Fergus station is currently using. And our purchasing bylaw allows that type of purchase as long as council approves it via recommendation. So we are recommending to council that we purchase the Hearst system hydraulic fire rescue equipment, similar to the equipment used by the Fergus station. And we purchased from the Ontario distributor of that equipment, which is Code 4 Fire and Rescue. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Dan. Questions from council? Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to ask Deputy Chief Carn a question. John, just for the benefit of the public, can you just help us understand the importance of this equipment and how it would be used, or how in training it simulates activities at a fire, or how you'll use it operationally and why it's important?
Sure. So thank you for the question. These tools are primarily used at vehicle accidents and incidents where we will have people trapped in vehicles and we need to extricate those people. So what we're talking about the jaws of life, as everybody knows it. Things to cut open doors, cut off roofs, and hydraulic ramps. So that's their primary purpose. We do have a number of vehicle accidents with extrication that we attend throughout a year. Both having Highway 6 and Kent Road 7, kind of two major arteries that run through our township. We attend a number of those emergency scenes. So those are primarily what we use the tools for. We will conduct several training sessions throughout the year. We get cars donated to us from local towing companies. So the firefighters do have lots of opportunity at both stations throughout the year to use that equipment.
Councillor Van Leeuwen?
Yeah, no questions. I think it's good that we get this purchased and even have the same equipment in case you're on a big scene. It's also a piece of equipment you hope you never use, but you should have it. So, okay, thanks for the report.
Councillor McElwain?
No questions.
Councillor Dunsmore?
Yeah, no, closest thing to a no-brainer we've ever had. The same piece of equipment, less money than we budgeted. So let's do it.
Councillor Dunsmore, did you say you were volunteering the firefighters to use your vehicle?
Absolutely. They've actually cut me out of a vehicle with one of those back in the 90s. So I don't want to go through it again, but if they need to pull somebody out, I'll volunteer.
Councillor McCray?
Thank you, Marilyn. Yeah, it makes sense to standardize our equipment.
I'll read the recommendation that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington authorize for the negotiated award for the replacement of hydraulic fire rescue equipment to Code 4 Fire and Rescue Inc. at a cost of $57,975 plus HST. Have a move for that recommendation. Councillor McElwain, seconded by Councillor Foster. All in favor? And that is carried. Moving on to item 8 on our agenda, we have 4 information items: minutes from the Economic Development Task Force, minutes from the Community Services Advisory Committee, minutes from the Healthy Growth Advisory Committee, and our tracking list. Any questions on any of those 4 information items? Okay, last thing on our agenda, a motion to adjourn. Without Councillor Kittrus, I don't know how we're going to get past this one. Oh, Councillor Dunsmore, good. Way to stand up there, Councillor Dunsmore, and take one for the team. Councillor Van Leeuwen, all in favor? And we are adjourned. Have a good rest of the afternoon and a good rest of the week. Bye-bye.